Today we are going to talk about oak and maple. Oak is an investment banker with a big investment banking firm here in my hometown of Boston. And Oak makes a ton of money. Oak lives in a multi-million-dollar home in what is always called a leafy suburb of Boston. And Oak lives with his spouse, Maple, and their two beautiful children, and it is paradise. But all is not well in paradise. Because of Oak's intense investment banking job, Oak has to work late many nights. He goes on dinners with clients. They often last until 8 or 9 or 10 at night. Oak comes home late and often significantly inebriated. And Oak is never around to help with the children. And if Maple is awake when they get home, they just start fighting. And so Maple is exhausted dealing with the children. Maple is basically just lonely. And so after a couple of years of this, Maple decides that it really is time to get a divorce. So Maple comes to me. I'm Maple's attorney. And I'm going to share my screen. And so what I do is I log into Family Law Software. I go to the file manager and I start a new file for Maple. I'm clicking the new button right here, and that starts a new file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to register Maple as a client. So I didn't mention their last name is Tree. And that's Maple's email address. Second party is Oak. And my email address is filled in, and I click Register Client. And what happens is that a registration email is sent to Mapletree at Maple's email address. And the email will have a link for the client to log into the client site. Once the client is registered, the client's file will appear in my shared files list, and we both will be able to view and edit the file. So now I go to my email. And here is the email that I just received from Family Law Software. I received 2 emails, one as myself, the professional, and one as Maple, the client. I'm clicking now the link for Maple, the client. And I'm copying the email address, clicking the link. And this takes me now to the client portal for familylawsoftware.com. As Maple, I enter the email address and I create a password. And I set my password, and then I log in. Maple's email address, and my password. And now Maple is logged in. And Maple is now going to enter Maple's information. So we see background information, income for Maple, expense for Maple, income for Oak, expense for Oak, and assets and debts for both parties. So let's start with the background. And we'll enter the children, 2 beautiful children. Jerry, born 2015, and Willow, born in 2018. And now we'll enter income for Maple. Maple is a part-time librarian. Maple earns $15,000 at that job. And income for Oak, we'll enter wage and salary income for Oak. And Oak, as we said, earns the big bucks, $300,000. Oh, but that's not big for an investment banker. Well, but investment bankers get a lot of their income in bonus. So actually, Oak gets a $500,000 annual bonus. And now let's enter assets for the parties. And we'll enter that beautiful house, add a real estate property, and we'll say Walnut Street, worth $3 million, getting ahead of ourselves, so the mortgage is $2 million. The monthly mortgage payment is $25,000, and it's a 3% mortgage. And we'll say the property is titled jointly. So that's the real estate, and we'll just enter one other asset now, which is Oak's 401k. Oak is really enthusiastic about this 401k. So and it's currently worth, well, Maple is not sure. Maple thinks it's worth maybe $500,000. And it's Oak's account, and Oak is contributing $20,000 a year. So this is what Maple knows. Maple has finished entering Maple's information. Of course, the real Maple would spend more time and enter more items, but we'll get this for now. So Maple is done. Maple has entered Maple's information. And Maple clicks done for now. So this triggers an email to Maple's professional, who is me. And Maple is now logged out. And now I am Maple's attorney. I go into Family Law Software. I click File Manager. I go to my shared files, which is here. These are files that the client can open as well as I can open. And here is the file that Maple just created. I open it up and I see all the information that Maple just created. Maple has come into my office. Maple is sitting down with me. And Maple's first question is about the children. We have these children. I make $15,000 a year. It's not going to be enough. I want to continue to live in this beautiful house where my children are being raised and where their lives are and their preschool is and their elementary school is. Am I going to be able to afford it? So the first question is, how much child support is Oak going to have to pay? Now, child support is determined by formula. The formula, it's like a income tax calculation. In some states, it is very complicated. And there's a different one in every state. And we're in Massachusetts now, so we'll look at the Massachusetts calculation. And in family law software, just entering the software, the first thing I see at the top is the child support, $6,296 per month paid by Oak. So instantly, this critical question that Maple has is answered in the software. In a lot of states, and Massachusetts is one of them, the amount of, if Oak spends more time with the children, then Oak's child support diminishes. Now, in many states, this is a smooth scale, where the more time the other spouse spends, the lower child support gets. Massachusetts has kind of a step function. So it's either shared custody or sole custody, and every state is different. But here's how Massachusetts does it. So Oak is angling for shared custody because Oak wants to, Oak loves the children, of course, but what Oak really wants is to reduce that child support. And Oak knows that if Oak has shared custody, that child support will go down. So what happens if they have shared custody? Well, we just click this box here, and that says shared custody, and child support went down to $61.23 per month. Well, for Oak, that's not so much. Oak's willing to let Maple have shared custody for the extra $200 a month, and so they decide on sole custody. Now, in Massachusetts, there are half a dozen states approximately where not only is child support a calculated number, but alimony, also known as spousal support or spousal maintenance, is a calculated number as well. So we can click here, scroll down and see what alimony would be, and it would be $29.96 per week. Now, Massachusetts is, I believe, now unique as a result of a decision that came down from the Massachusetts Supreme Court just a couple of weeks ago. It says that you have to actually calculate child support two different ways. So we have in the software the two different ways to calculate child support, and we just click a checkbox, and you'll see that child support goes from $5,000 one way to $6,000 the other way. Two things that Supreme Courts or courts should never get involved in are tax law and child support law, because they don't know anything about them. There's a crazy decision. The purpose of child support calculations is to give certainty in these cases, to avoid a lot of fighting and a lot of wrangling between the parties and create efficiency in the legal process. And the Massachusetts Supreme Court just upended that efficiency completely, giving the parties two different child support numbers and then letting them fight over them. And the reason for me to mention this is that we've seen two things that are pretty different in Massachusetts. Every state has its unique things in child support, or in the financial form, crazy things. Family law software does child support in more than 20 states, 23 states, which is more than any other software, and does the financial form in 13 states, which is also more than any other software. But every state is going to have weird, wild, wacky calculations, and we've just seen what they are in Massachusetts. So now a question that Maple has is, well, what's the impact on me of the child support and spousal support amount? How much does it actually help me? And so in family law software, you can just click this graph. And this graph shows the impact of child support and spousal support on the parties' incomes. And what do we see here? We see that on the left, these two bars, the blue bar is Maple's gross income. It was $15,000 a year. Oak's gross income was $800,000 a year. But after child support, alimony, and taxes, Maple is at almost $200,000 and Oak is above $300,000. Oak still is taking home, after paying the support and after paying taxes, Oak is still ahead of Maple, but Maple is in a much better situation. The two parties are much closer together in their incomes after taxes. This is before any expenses, but seeing this chart makes Maple feel a lot better and brings Maple comfort and takes Maple a little closer to settlement. And this chart and the instant availability of this chart is unique in family law software among its competitors. So now, so that's we've looked at incomes after taxes, but we haven't looked at expenses yet. So let's go enter some expenses for the parties. So I'm now going to go to financial data. I'm going to go to the income and expenses screen, and I'm going to enter some expenses for the parties. And I'm going to look at housing, etc. So I'm going to look at groceries. And the question is asking for groceries monthly. Maple doesn't know what her monthly grocery bill is, but Maple knows what the weekly grocery bill is. So we just click this calculator and we enter the $300 a week. The software instantly converts it to the monthly and displays it. And then food for children is maybe another $100 a week. So we'll enter that. And Oak does not really have much of a grocery bill because Oak eats most of Oak's meals at the office. Oak may have a bit of a liquor bill, however. Oak is a single malt Scotch aficionado, and that does show up. So we would go through and enter the remaining expenses. There's also kind of a cool thing in family law software. If I decide to look at just one party at a time, I can enter expenses on a weekly, monthly, or annual basis, and the software will immediately convert that to the other timeframes. I can also footnote anything here. Whatever the footnote may be, and that footnote will then print with the financial forms. So we've entered the expenses. There's also a mortgage, which we've entered. We entered that previously, but it shows up here when we look at the real estate. So now the question is, well, how are Oak and Maple looking after all the expenses? And for that, we go to our budget report. We click on the reports tab here, and we go to the budget report. And what do we see? We see Oak and Maple monthly. We see the income, Maple earning $1,250 a month, Oak earning $60,000 a month. We see the child support income from Oak. We see the mortgage payment of $25,000. We see Oak's contribution to the 401k and support paid. We see a detailed calculation of income taxes, which most of our competitors don't do. And then we see the bottom line of each party, and Oak is doing all right, pulling in $24,000 a month, $24,000 a month, but oh my gosh, Maple is in distress. Because of that mortgage, Maple is now $10,000 per month in the hole. What is Maple going to do? Well, one way to adjust this is to increase the alimony amount. And under the circumstances, they all agree we want Maple to be able to stay in the family home. We're going to agree to negotiate alimony, not be limited to the amount that's calculated by the statute. We're going to negotiate an alimony amount between the parties. And fortunately, family law software offers a couple of great ways to think about the negotiation of alimony, and these are in the analysis section of the software. And the first way we're going to think about alimony is to say, let's look at that bottom line again, and let's try to set alimony in a way that results in Oak and Maple, after all expenses, after taxes, and after all expenses, let's try to make them be as equal as possible. So I'm going to set an option here to look at living expenses and income after living expenses and calculate alimony required to achieve a target after taxes and living expenses. And what is the target? Now I'm going to say, what is my desired target? And my desired target is that Oak and Maple end up with 50% each of the income after expenses and taxes. The software instantly tells me that the alimony I need to achieve that equalization is $26,000 a month. And if I click details here, I see what the financial situation of the parties would be. In that case, Oak still has $1,250 a month of income, and Maple has $1,250 a month of income. Oak, $66,000. We see the alimony of $26,726 applied here in this test case. We see Oak still pays taxes of $24,000. Maple still has those living expenses of $26,000, that big mortgage. But because of the alimony, they end up exactly equal with $6,600 each after all their expenses. And if I want, I can look at this not just after all expenses, but I can look at equalizing the numbers after on line 6 here, income after taxes, which is another way people sometimes like to look at it. Forget the expenses, just equalize the income after taxes. I can do that as well. It's one of these options down here. I would just clear that checkbox. But Oak and Oak's lawyers say that is just too rich. Oak makes all this money. Oak is working hard. Oak is going to the long boozy dinners. Oak works until 10 o'clock at night. Maple has a soft, cushy life with the children, and it's just that $26,000 a month is just too much. Okay, let's take a different approach. And the different approach is what we call meet recipient need. It's a different approach to alimony, where we're going to say, let's look at getting Maple to the point where Maple covers all the expenses we've entered and maybe a $10,000 cushion on top of that for expenses we haven't thought of. So in that case, we enter $10,000, and in order to get Maple to that point, this is an annual amount, only $20,000 of alimony a month would be needed. And again, we can look at the details, and after tax, Maple ends up with $800 a month, which is the $10,000 a year cushion that we were talking about. So that's okay, right? That brings Maple. And if we wanted Maple to exactly break even, have no cushion, just cover the expenses we've entered, we'd enter 0 here, and it would be $19,697. So, okay, that's what they decide to do. We can now click here to enter or change the actual alimony amount. And we're not going to use Family Law Software's calculation. And we're going to enter $20,000 per month. And we're going to enter that from the beginning of 2022 to the end of 2026. We're going to enter 4 years of alimony. And by the way, the analyses we just saw are unique in Family Law Software. So now Oak is saying, you know, I just want to be free from Maple. I don't want to deal with Maple anymore. I don't want to pay alimony to Maple every month for the next 5 years. I just want to pay one number and be done. So the question now for the parties is, well, what is the dollar amount, being aware that there's interest, that there's discounting for future payments. Future payments are worth less than present payments. How do we discount for interest and for taxes in those states where alimony is deductible, and come with a lump sum number that is equivalent, financially equivalent to the 5 years of monthly alimony payments? And family law software just shows that right here. So if Oak can come up with about $2 million, Oak can buy out those alimony payments, and Maple can invest that money then and in a safe way and be financially equivalent to receiving the alimony every month. And family law software is unique in showing that present value, which is a question that comes up in many cases. Right there, as soon as you enter alimony, you get the present value result. And actually, I'm not even aware of any software that shows the present value in that interactive way. All right, so Oak and Maple are now feeling okay. If I go back to my budget report, we have Maple almost breaking even, just as we thought, and Oak with $13,000 a month. We're all okay with that. So now the question is, how do we divide the assets, right? They've got this beautiful house in the leafy suburb. They've got the 401k. How do they divide those assets between the parties? So now we go to, and they're thinking they might want to divide the assets 50-50, which is a very common approach. So now we go back to our analysis screen and we click divide the property between the parties. So here, the two assets that we've entered, the 88 Walnut Street and the Vanguard 401k, are both listed. And Maple really wants to keep that house. So we give Maple 100% of the house. And you see the bar up here indicates that now Maple has $1 million. And why is it $1 million? I thought it was a $3 million house. Well, the software is showing the equity. So it's a $3 million house, but with a $2 million mortgage. So there's 1 million of equity. And we go look at the Vanguard 401k, and we learned from discovery that the value of the asset is not 500,000, it's actually 800,000. So I'm going to go back on my enter data screen, go to my assets and liabilities, go to my defined contribution plan, and change that value from 500 to 800. By the way, the next time Maple logs in to Maple's client portal, that value will be changed to 800, and all the other entries that we made, the expense entries that we made, will appear in Maple's client data entry screen. Okay, let's go back to our analysis. And let's go to divide the property between the parties. And now Oak is really keen on keeping that 401k. We're going to give Oak 100% of the 401k. And we see that we're not quite at 50-50. We see Maple with 55%, Oak with 44%. They want to get to 50-50. How do they do it? So in family law software, I can click this checkbox, shows me how far the parties are from 50-50. To give 50% to Maple, I need to increase Oak's marital property by $100,000. So I could do that. I could just give Oak $100,000 of the house. And the result of that would be that Maple gets 900,000. Oak would have 10%, Maple would have 90%. And I could write a document that says now Oak owns 10% of the house, Maple owns 90% of the house, and whenever it's sold, they divide the proceeds that way. That is not usually what people do. What people usually do is Maple goes and takes out a second mortgage or refinances the mortgage, gets 100,000 from that refinancing, gives it to Oak. What family law software has done is very quickly, it has shown the amount that that mortgage needs to be to get the parties overall to a 50-50 split. And in family law software, I'm not going to show it right now, but in family law software, you can go to the asset page, you can enter the mortgage, you can specify that 100,000 of the proceeds is going to Oak. When you come back to this division of marital property page, it will show the mortgage going to Oak, the remaining equity staying with Maple, and a 50-50 split. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just restore us to actually, I'll leave it this way as a shorthand, as a placeholder for arriving at a 50-50 split. So now they've settled child support and spousal support. They have divided their assets. They're really, all they need to do is write it up and sign it. But not quite, because there's one more thing they haven't really done, which is they haven't looked to the future. In Oak and Maple are okay this year, but what about in the future? So let's look at our projection reports. So now I've gone back to my reports tab. I click more reports, and I'm going to look at our projected net income after expenses and taxes. And I see over the next 3 years, which is a common time frame, they look great. But let's go back. What if instead of showing 3 years, I show 20 years? And attorneys will like to, choose the time frame they want, so we let them choose that. And Maple is seriously negative for a couple of years, and then Maple recovers. Well, what's going on there? Why is that happening? We can drill down here, see details on the spreadsheet for net income, and see what is going on. The one thing that we see happens is that after 5 years, the alimony stops. When that alimony stops, that really throws Maple into a negative cash flow situation, big time. But a couple of years later, Maple is rescued because the mortgage payments stop also, and that sustains Maple, and the child support payments, fortunately, are continuing. One thing you'll see is that the child support payments diminish as the youngest child turns 18. The software automatically stops that child support payment. There's a partial year, and then we've got 53,976, which is the child support projection for one child. And then it turns out that at 20 years is the last year for child support, and then that child support will go to 0. And you can see it all right here in this spreadsheet. So although it's going to, Maple sees that although it's going to be a tough couple of years, Maple is going to be okay. In a lot of cases, when that spousal support stops or when that child support stops, the party is seriously not okay. And it's really a great thing to be able to have these projections and negotiate for them at this moment, which is the only moment you can negotiate for them pretty much, a way to plan to live your life so that you don't end up, as way too many people do, suddenly bereft. Family law software is the only software among its competitors that does these kinds of projections. It's also the only software that does the property division in an integrated way with the financial forms, the way we have just seen. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope everybody has a sense of what family law software is all about.